Hi friends, welcome back to my cozy little corner of the internet. I'm so glad you're here. Today's story is perfect for anyone who's ever gone through a big life change or taken a step into the unknown. It's about college, but not in the stressful late-night exam, cafeteria food kind of way. This one is all warmth, wonder, and the beauty of small moments. So make yourself a cup of something comforting. Fluff your pillows and settle in for a gentle, heartwarming tale that's suitable for absolutely everyone. It all began in a quiet valley tucked between soft hills and patches of woodland. That's where my college was. Not a big, noisy campus with tall concrete buildings, but a peaceful collection of ivy-covered cottages and brick pathways lined with wildflowers. Some of the buildings were so old, they leaned slightly to the side, as if listening to centuries of laughter and whispers that echoed through the halls. I remember arriving on the very first day, the sun rising behind the misty hills and lighting up the dew-covered grass like a sea of diamonds. My parents had hugged me goodbye just moments earlier, and I stood there by the arched entrance, suitcase in one hand, a small potted plant in the other. Nervous? Definitely. But also quietly excited. My dorm was in a converted manor house, its windows tall and its staircases wonderfully creaky. My room was on the third floor, tucked under the sloping roof with a view of the central courtyard. There was a big bay window with a bench seat, and the first thing I did was place my little planta trailing pothos named Oliverite where the light hit just right. My roommate, Lila, arrived an hour later. She had a suitcase nearly twice her size, freckles across her nose, and an instant, easy smile. "You like tea?" she asked, holding up a tin of chamomile before even unpacking. I knew right then we were going to be friends. That first week was a blur of small introductions. We met professors with soft voices and chalk-dusted sleeves, classmates who wore scarves even in warm weather, and friendly staff who handed out campus maps and fresh-baked muffins from a little cafe called the Lantern Nook. Every path we walked was lined with old trees that whispered in the breeze, and at night, the lamplights along the cobblestone lanes gave everything a golden, storybook glow. There was a little library shaped like an octagon, filled with nooks and reading chairs that looked like they'd been borrowed from grandmother's parlors. I found myself returning there day after day, sitting in the same sunny corner with Olive beside me in a canvas tote. Lila called it my thinking spot. Even though I missed home in small ways like the sound of the kitchen clock ticking or the smell of my neighbor's rose garden, there was something quietly magical about this place. It didn't feel like I was losing anything. It felt like I was growing, gently, like a plant stretching toward the light. But of course, the real beauty of this place wasn't just in the trees or the tea shops. It was in the people, some of whom I hadn't even met yet. It was in my second week that I discovered the tree. Lila and I had taken to wandering the grounds in the evenings, our mugs of tea in hand, steam curling around our cheeks as the day slipped into twilight. That's when we spotted it just past the herb garden and behind the music hall. An enormous old oak tree, branches wide like open arms, with a hand-carved bench nestled into its roots. The bench had initials carved into it, and hanging from one low branch was a tiny wind chime that whispered whenever the breeze passed by. "I think this might be our spot," Lila said, smiling. And so it was. We started meeting there every evening after classes, watching the sky change colors and the stars slowly blink awake. Some nights we talked for hours. Other times, we just sat in easy silence, listening to the wind chime and the distant sounds of someone practicing piano from an open window. It wasn't long before others found their way to us, like birds drawn to a warm perch. There was Mira, from the art department, who always smelled faintly of paint and lavender oil. Theo, who studied botany and always had leaves in his pockets. And Jonah, who played the violin and sometimes brought his instrument to the tree just to play soft songs as the sun dipped below the hills. Together, we formed something gentle and unspoken, a little group of quiet souls who felt safest in peaceful places. One chilly evening, we brought blankets and candles in jars. Theo brewed mulled cider in a thermos, and Mira sketched the scene of us nestled beneath the great oak, the candlelight flickering like fireflies. She called it the Friendship Tree. That name stuck, and from then on, the spot became something more than just a bench under a tree. It was our home within a home, We celebrated the first autumn rain there, clinking mugs and watching the leaves tumble. We read poetry aloud on sleepy afternoons and left notes in a small tin hidden in the roots, a tradition we passed on quietly to anyone who joined us. Even in classes and lectures, when things felt overwhelming, just knowing that the tree was waiting steady, rooted, full of stories, made everything feel okay. College wasn't just about studying. It was about tiny rituals like hanging a scarf on the bench to say, "I was here," or slipping a note into someone's textbook that simply said, "You're doing fine." I'd never had friendships like this before. They weren't loud or dramatic. They were like the wind through the leaves, gentle, constant, and full of life. And as winter approached, with snow starting to gather in the corners of the windows and everyone bundling up tighter each day, I began to realize that this little chapter of life was something I'd carry with me forever. But there was still one more surprise waiting, one that would leave an imprint on my heart in the softest, most beautiful way. It was early spring of my final year, and the valley was waking up again. Buds pushed through frost-hardened soil. The air smelled of damp earth and dandelions, and the tree, the one we called the friendship tree, was just starting to grow green again. Life on campus moved slower during those first warm days. We sat outside more often, carrying our books and picnic blankets to sunny patches on the lawn. Evenings under the oak returned too, but with a quieter rhythm. Lila was working on her final thesis. Mira had accepted an art residency in another country, and Theo spent long hours in the greenhouse, preparing his research garden. Jonah had been offered a music apprenticeship in a little village across the sea. Everyone was stretching towards something new, and I wasn't quite sure what came next. I had a few job applications floating around, but no concrete plans. All I knew was that change was coming. One evening, as the sunset turned the hills golden and cast shadows like lace across the courtyard, I visited the tree alone. I brought a soft blanket, a notebook, and, of course, olives still trailing new leaves after all this time. There was something peaceful about being there alone again, like circling back to the start of a favorite song. I sat on the bench, my back resting against the curve of the tree, and wrote a letter. A simple one. Not to anyone in particular, but to the place itself. "Dear tree," I wrote, "thank you for holding us, for catching our laughter, our quiet tears, our secrets, for making space for soft friendships and slow days. You'll always be part of who I am." I folded the letter gently, placed it in the tin we had hidden in the roots years ago, and closed the lid with a small smile. I knew someone would find it someday. Maybe a new student just starting their first year. Maybe a quiet soul looking for somewhere to belong. And maybe, just maybe, it would make them feel less alone. The next day, I met my friends one last time under the tree. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. We just sat in a circle, sharing warm bread and memories. When the stars blinked into view and the wind chime whispered its soft song, we all leaned in and hugged, like petals folding together at dusk. And that was it. Graduation came and went, with robes and smiles and cameras clicking. But in my heart, the real ending had already happened quietly under the tree, with candlelight, letters, and laughter carried off by the breeze. Even now, years later, whenever I smell lavender or hear a wind chime, I think of those days, of friendships that never needed grand declarations, just soft, steady presence. So if you're starting something new, or missing something old, maybe this story is a reminder. The best parts of life are often the quietest ones. The warm cups of tea, the slow sunsets,